Okay, now we're official. So how's everybody doing tonight? Anybody taking the practice test? I just got word earlier this week that one of our students took the test, got his license.
Hey Dale,
Yes,
I took two tests last night and both of them I got 74. Just came short.
that's getting pretty close. Just a little bit more, and I think you're there. Well, we still have one more week left. This is class number 7, and somebody else logging in. And also, I normally hold 1 or 2 follow-up classes afterwards. If anybody needs a little extra help or if you have questions or concerns, you're welcome to stay and attend to those if you'd like to. Usually on one of those follow-up classes, I will do a demonstration on how to program a radio using a computer. So if you'd like to stay and watch that, we'll probably do that not next week, but in 2 weeks. Okay, any questions? Anything that we need to go over before we move on? So tonight, I'm going to get started right away because we got a lot to go over and we're going to have some fun stuff tonight. Let's see, this and this, and there we go. Okay, can you see that okay? Okay, so I think we're ready to move on. Does anybody know what is the age limit on getting a ham radio license?
As long as you can pass the test.
That's right. There's no age limit. As long as you can pass the test, that's all you need. I think the youngest licensed technician that I've heard on the radio was about 8 years old. 2 years ago, I had 2 young men, both about 10 years old, that took my class, and one of them got his license. The other one never did. So, yeah, it's for all ages, anybody that would like to. But you have to be able to pass the test first. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about repeaters. This is a very important part of ham radio because there's repeaters all over everywhere. So a repeater is, oops, let me clean up some of my mess here. Okay, typically a repeater we want to put up in a very high place. Around this area, we usually put them up on mountaintops. But if you're in, flatter land, you can put them on top of a tall building or someplace. The higher you can get it, the better it works. And a repeater has 2 frequencies. If you're, like, say you're in a base station down here, you can talk into the repeater and it will rebroadcast on another frequency so that somebody far away can hear you. The whole idea of a repeater is to extend the range, especially if you're using a portable. Little portables, they don't get much range on those, just a few miles. But if you can hit a repeater, you can reach out to sometimes hundreds of miles. Repeaters work very well, and there's a lot of them around. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that works and how we get into it and what you need to know for programming and so forth. Okay, so a repeater, like I say, we want to put it up in a very high place, typically on top of a mountain or a building or something. And when you talk into a repeater, there's 2 frequencies. Let's call this frequency A. We call that the input frequency. That's the going into the repeater. And then the repeater will then rebroadcast on a different frequency. Let's call that frequency B. And that way, you can talk clear over a mountain or clear into very far away places. Then when the mobile or portable unit replies, they will transmit on frequency A, and once again it comes out on frequency B. The repeater broadcasts in all directions. So wherever you are or wherever your base station is, if you can get into a repeater, then you can extend your range quite a bit. Now we call this repeater is what we call a full duplex system. That means it can transmit and receive at the same time. So as the repeater is receiving, it's rebroadcasting almost instantaneously. There's a very slight delay, but not very much. And it just rebroadcasts whatever comes into it, goes out the other side. So that's called a full duplex system. Now, the portables and the mobiles are not full duplex. You can't transmit and receive at the same time. So we call that half duplex. That means you can transmit on one frequency, but you can receive on another, but not both at the same time. So that those are terms that you might need to know for the test. Now there's another term. Sometimes we have on frequencies where we just want to talk direct from a radio to a radio without any repeater. Well, let's call that frequency C. And you can talk both directions, but you have to be in range. You have to be close enough where you can actually talk to another person on another mobile radio or a portable radio. So that is referred to as simplex. And these terms you hear a lot over the radio. You talk about duplex and simplex, and typically they talk about repeaters or a simplex frequency. But a simplex is just direct radio to radio. There's no repeater, there's no connections of any kind, just straight one radio to the next. Okay, let me show you a little video here. Kind of demonstrate a little bit about repeaters. Oops. There we go. Just wanted to show you a repeater. It's something that is very commonly used in ham radio. We have repeaters all over everywhere. They're up on mountaintops. And a repeater is intended to pick up small signals and rebroadcast it from a mountaintop so that it can transmit very far away. If you're using a little small portable like this, you're probably only going to be able to talk 2 or 3, maybe 4 miles at best. But if you can get into a repeater, you can sometimes talk hundreds of miles. If you look on the front of the radio, you see 2 little lights. There's a green light, indicates that it's receiving, and a red light indicates that it's transmitting. A repeater has the ability to transmit and receive at the same time, which is different than a mobile radio or a portable radio. I have these 2 radios set up on the repeater, and if I talk into one, test, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see it's picking up on the other one. So I'm going through the repeater to that radio. Now there's actually 2 frequencies involved. One frequency, we call that the input frequency. That's the frequency going into the repeater. And then we have the output frequency, which is what the repeater transmits on. And actually, if I shut the repeater off for a minute, you'll see now that these radios don't talk to each other, because I'm talking into the repeater, which isn't there, and it's listening to the output of the repeater, which isn't there. So if we have the repeater on, take a minute for it to boot back up again. So now we can actually talk through the repeater from one radio to another. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Now there's also something that you'll notice too. When I key up the repeater, if you listen, the repeater stays keyed for about 3 seconds after I let go of the transmit button. We do that on purpose. Not that. The reason we do that, we call that a squelch tail, because sometimes you're not sure if you're getting into the repeater or not, but if you hear that squelch tail come back, then you know that you've gotten into the repeater. It's just a way of letting you know that, that you made a connection there. So one of the things ham radio people don't like you to do is we call it kerchunking the repeater. That's where you just key it up and listen to see if you're hitting it or not. They get kind of irritated over that. So if you do key up the repeater, make sure you give your call sign, KE7VMN. So that way, at least they know who's doing it. Sometimes you get yelled at if you kerchunk the repeaters a lot. But yeah, that squelch tail is there on purpose. We make it so that you can tell if you've actually gotten into the repeater or not. So like I say, this is a very small one, and there's actually more components involved. This is just the radio part of it. We also have some other equipment to make it so that it will work up on a mountaintop. They're actually quite sophisticated, but they work really, really good. And one of the things that we like to do is sometimes we can link the repeaters together. We can get 2 or 3 or 4 or more repeaters all linked together. So if you talk into one, it broadcasts out all of them. So it sounds like somebody's hearing us. So we better quit playing on the radio. So anyway, I just wanted to show you what a repeater actually is and what it looks like. And we're going to talk more about them when we get back into the classroom. So let's switch back over and we'll talk some more about repeaters. There we go. Okay, some of the terms that you're going to need to know, and this might be on the test too, I'm not sure. When you go on the air and you ask somebody, what's the frequency of a particular repeater, they're going to give you 3 pieces of information. They're going to give you the frequency, which is the output frequency of the repeater. That's what you're listening to on your radio. And they're going to give you an offset. The offset will either be plus or minus, or sometimes positive or negative. And what that means is the frequency going into the repeater, if it's positive, that means that that frequency is higher than the frequency coming out of the repeater. So it'd be a positive offset. Or if it's lower than the frequency coming out of the repeater, that would be a negative offset. So in the VHF band, the 2-meter band, excuse me, in the 2-meter band, the offset is always 600 kilohertz, or that would be 0.6 megahertz. And it can be either positive or negative. Just depends on how it's set up. In the UHF band, the offset is always 5 megahertz, and it's always positive. When the early days, when they were doing VHF, it was kind of a dartboard way of picking out frequencies. It was just very random. There was no plan to it. But once they got up into the UHF band, they said, okay, why don't we standardize this a little bit? So in the UHF band, the offset is always 5 megahertz, and it's always positive. But VHF can be, it's always 600 kilohertz, but it could be positive or negative. And the third piece of information that they're going to give you is the code. That's oftentimes referred to as the PL code or the PL tone. There's actually several methods of doing it, but ham radio has always used what's known as the PL tones. These are a set of tones. They're audible tones, very low frequency. As you can see, it starts down at 67 hertz. Some people can't even hear it down that far. But it's very low frequency and it's very low level. You won't hear it on your radio because the radio actually filters it out. But the radio, when you transmit, whatever tone that you're transmitting with is transmitted out, and the repeater hears it. The repeater will not work unless it sees the correct tone. The reason for that is because repeaters are very high altitude. They're they can reach out a very long ways. And sometimes, we're not the only ones that use these repeater frequencies. They're all over the country. So it's quite possible you could have another repeater on the same frequency as yours, say 50 or even 100 miles away. And if there's a mobile radio out there running around talking, they could conceivably key up your repeater. It just depends on if they're in the right location and the conditions are right. So we put these tones on there so that only our people have the correct tone. People that are far, far away, they don't have the right tone, or they may not have a tone at all. So that way it limits it to just the people that we want to use the repeater. Everybody else is going to have different tones. The idea is to have all the repeaters with different tones all across the country, so you're not getting into the wrong repeater accidentally. Normally in simplex mode, we don't use tones. You really don't need them. There's no purpose in it. People say, well, yeah, occasionally I get a little interference, you know. Well, that's very occasional. It doesn't happen very often. So normally we don't even use tones in simplex mode. It's just for the repeater. It's so that the repeater knows that we have the proper authority to get into that repeater. So now this was actually developed by Motorola way back in the very early days of repeaters. And Motorola used to call it private line. That was the name for this system of tones. Well, it got shortened over the years. We now call it PL tones. And other manufacturers, other radio manufacturers came along and said, hey, that's a really cool idea. We're going to do that too. And Motorola said, that's copyrighted. You can't do that. So all the other manufacturers came up with different names for it, but even though they use the same tones, or sometimes they'll throw in a couple extra tones just to make it a little different. It's just a way to get around the copyright issue. So way back in the early days, GE used to be really big into two-way radio, and they referred to it as channel guard, which is exactly the same thing. Quiet tone was, I think that was Kenwood that came up with that one. And again, it's the same thing. Some manufacturers call it private call or quiet channel or whatever. It's just a different name, but they have to do that to get around the copyright issues. But it's very standard all across the country, even around the world, that repeaters use these set of tones. I think there's 49 of them, if I remember correctly. It varies a little bit from one manufacturer to the other. So you need to know what the PL tone is for the particular repeater that you're wanting to talk on. So you need to know those three things. You need to know the frequency, which is the output of the repeater. You need to know the offset, either plus or minus. And you need to know what the tone is, the PL tone, in order to gain access to the repeater. Okay, here's some examples. If you're from this area here, these are local repeaters. We have a repeater on Mica Peak. The frequency is 146.980 megahertz, and that's the output of the repeater, and it has a negative offset, and that means that when you transmit, you're going to transmit 600 kilohertz below that frequency. So that would be 146.380 megahertz. So that's the input and the output frequencies of the radio. And a lot of radios are programmed. If you have to program them, you just put in whether it's plus or minus, and it will automatically calculate it for you. Some of the commercial radios, we have to actually enter the exact PL tone frequency. And the PL tone on that particular repeater is 127.3 hertz. So you have to have all three of those pieces of information to get into the repeater. The Canfield repeater is a UHF repeater, and the frequency is 443.975 megahertz, and it's a positive offset because UHF is always positive, and it's 5 megahertz. So the input frequency is going to be 448.975 megahertz. Because once they got into UHF, it's much more organized. It's very predictable. We know exactly what it's going to be. And the PL tone for that one is 136.5 hertz. And then little blacktail repeater is 146.680 with a negative offset. So the input would be 146.080. And the PL tone is 136.5. So there are some test questions about that. So you kind of have to know what, the nomenclature for the repeaters. Okay, now I want to share some fun things with you. These things are not on the test, but they are real things in the real world. And I just wanted to show it to you just out of curiosity. There's a thing called a trunking system. I don't know if you've maybe have heard that before. There are no trunking systems in the ham radio that I'm aware of. because they're very, very expensive, but they do work really well. And I'm going to show you how a trunking system works. If we have a system, and they can have as many channels as they want to, but let's say this particular one is a 4-channel trunking system. So there's 4 repeaters on a tower, and the channel 1 is the control channel. And channel 1 is always transmitting continuously. It's transmitting digital data. These trunking systems are all done in digital mode. And when you have a radio that, let's say you want to talk on the radio, and I just used colors to distinguish, but these are talk in a trunking system. We have talk groups. We don't have frequencies that we allocate to. So the talk group, let's call this one yellow. Okay, so yellow wants to talk, so he keys the transmitter on his microphone, and the system says, okay, all the yellow radios go to channel 1. So they all switch automatically to channel 1. The user doesn't even know it. And then when yellow talks, all the yellow radios hear it. So while yellow is talking, let's say blue wants to talk. Okay, so blue keys up his transmitter. The system says, okay, all the blue radios go to channel 2. So while they're talking, now green wants to talk. So again, the control channel tells all the green radios to go to channel 3. And then red wants to talk. So all the red radios go to channel 4. So now we have 4 channels all going at the same time. But by this time, see, channel 1 or the yellow has stopped talking. So now brown wants to talk. So the system says, okay, brown, all the brown radios go to channel 1. And then purple wants to talk because blue has stopped talking. So the system sends all the blue or purple radios to channel 2. And now yellow wants to talk again. So the system tells all the yellow radios to go to channel 4. And then orange and so forth. So all these different groups can be talking all at the same time. Now this system looks like it's really busy, doesn't it? But oops. But actually, if you look at the time frame on it, right there and right there are the only times when all 4 channels are busy at the same time. All the rest of the time, there's an opening there somewhere. Now this whole sequence here is about 1 minute. So in 1 minute's time, we've got all these different groups talking all at the same time. And once in a rare while, if you happen to key the mic just when all 4 channels are busy, we get what we refer to as the bonk. The radio kind of makes a bonking sound, and that just indicates that all channels are busy. And usually by the time you let go of the transmit button and immediately push it again, something is cleared and you're able to get on. So trunking systems are really, really efficient. They work really well, but they are very, very expensive. Typically repeaters and towers for those are in the millions of dollars, which is way out of our range. But we still use the same basic technology. If you ever use a digital radio, if you talk on a digital repeater, you have to put a talk group in there because it's that trunking setup. But the user doesn't even know what channel he's on. The radio switches channels automatically. The tower tells the radio what channel to go to, and the radio just goes to that channel, and the user doesn't even know. Okay, so there's not much detail on that, but it just kind of gives you a flavor for what trunking is. Now, trunking can also be on multiple towers. So when you go to talk on your radio, you key the button, the system will tell your radio which tower to go to and which channel to go to. And all of the corresponding radios will go to that tower and that channel. Or sometimes they're linked together. Some towers will be on channel 1 and other towers will be on channel 3, but you can still talk to each other. They're very sophisticated, but they do work really well. We have for law enforcement and public safety, they have a huge, huge trunking system. The last I heard, there was over 1,500 radios on the trunking system. And they have See, I think they've got 8 or 9 towers now all over the county, and they're all linked together, and it's very, very efficient. It just it's amazing to watch. Um, just as an example here, I was going to point out, let's take the yellow channel, for example. Let's say that's the police department. So dispatch calls out on the radio and it goes out on channel 1, and all of the police radios went to channel 1. So dispatch says, car 54, where are you? Well, over here, car 54 answers and says, I'm right here. What do you need? And then dispatch comes back on channel 2 and says, I need you to go to City Hall and pick up some papers. So he answers on channel 2 again. Okay, I'm on my way. So this was about a 1-minute time period, and yellow made 3 transmissions on, or 4 transmissions on 3 different channels. And the user didn't know, had no idea what channel they were on. So that's how a trunking system works. And then in addition to that, I'm going to show you how cellular works, how cell phone towers work. Cell phone is actually a trunking system, but they have taken trunking to the next level, to a level it's unimaginable. But it does the same technology. It's you know, the tower actually controls your cell phone. When you go to make a phone call, the tower tells you what tower to go to, and it tells your phone what channel to go to. So let's say you have a cell phone here and you're talking on the phone to somebody. When you're talking into the phone, you're actually talking into a digital voice recorder that's inside your cell phone. You're not actually transmitting over the air, and the person that's talking to you is also talking into a digital voice recorder at the tower. And then when the time comes, the tower comes around and says, okay, send me your data. So then your cell phone keys up, transmits the data to the tower, and simultaneously the tower transmits its data to your cell phone. And then your phone disconnects. So now you're listening to what that person said 1 minute ago because it's on a digital recorder, and the person at the other end is now listening to what you said 1 minute ago. There's about a 1 minute delay in it. But your phone is only transmits for just a few milliseconds out of every minute. So now we can put a second cell phone, a third cell phone, a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and 8 cell phones all on the same tower on the same frequency all at the same time. And the tower will go around, and at first we'll go to the first phone and say, okay, send me your data. And then it goes to the second phone, says, send me your data, and the third and the fourth, and it takes 1 minute, I'm sorry, not 1 minute, it takes 1 second to go all the way around and get the data from all 8 cell phones. So, so like I say, when you're talking, there's about a 1 second delay because you're actually talking into a voice recorder and that gets transmitted to the tower. And so the cell phone only transmits for a few milliseconds out of every second. So that's why these little tiny handheld cell phones, the battery can last all day, sometimes 2 days or even 3 days. It's because they don't transmit very much. It's just very short periods of time. And typically a cell tower can have as many as 20 channels on it. There's actually 20 repeaters in there. And so if you've got 20 channels, each channel has 8 cell phones on it. That's what, 160 cell phones all on the same tower at the same time. And the tower has the ability to transfer you from one tower to the other, because it's also monitoring your signal strength. And if your signal's starting to get kind of weak, it may transfer you to another tower. And then you're connected, and your phone call will also transmit or transfer to another tower as well. So it's going to tell you which tower to go to, or it's going to tell your phone which tower to go to, which channel to go to, and which time slot to go in. And so that way we can get a lot of cell phones on in it take up very little space. If any of you remember, what was it, about 20 or so years ago when cell phones used to be analog, and the FCC said, we're not going to do analog anymore. We want everybody to go digital. And this is the reason why, because digital, we can put so many more cell phones on on a tower at a time. Because back in those days when it was analog, one cell phone took one channel for the entire duration of the call. So at best, you could get maybe 20 cell phones on a tower, which was not very efficient. And now we can get, upwards of 160 or more. So that's how cell phones work. And, a cell phone is just a two-way radio, but it's all digital, and they're just transmitting digital data back and forth. Okay, one other thing, just for fun, is how does Wi-Fi work? Has anybody ever wondered about that? Well, Wi-Fi is a two-way radio, just like any other type of radio, except that it's a computer talking to a Wi-Fi device of some type, whatever you have in your home. So Wi-Fi uses a technique is called frequency hopping, or also called spread spectrum. There's two different terms. They both mean the same thing. Frequency hopping actually started back towards the end of World War II. They found out that it was a way of transmitting signals over the air and nobody could interpret it. Now the digital, of course, we do it digitally now. Back then they were doing just just in analog mode, but it did work. When you're sending and receiving computer data, the information is always broken up into packets. You may have heard this if you're familiar with computer stuff. A packet is just a bundle of digital data. They take whatever file you're sending, like if you're sending a document or something, it breaks it up into packets, and each packet contains more or less about 1,500 bytes of data. It can be more or less depending on what it is. So it holds about 1.5 kilobytes of data, and the computer can transmit one packet at a time. The way we do that, we have two devices. Let's say the one on the left is your Wi-Fi unit and the one on your right is your computer. Well, the Wi-Fi will send one packet of data to your computer. The computer then sends that same packet back to the Wi-Fi for verification to make sure that it got it correctly. And if the Wi-Fi says, yep, that's right, then it will send the next packet and your computer will send it back to the Wi-Fi. But if there's any interference or something that blocked the signal, when your computer sends it back and it's not the right data, then the Wi-Fi will send it again, and then your computer will send it back again for verification. So there's always a two-way send. It sends it and then receives it to make sure that it was correct. So in this frequency hopping, we have in the vertical columns here, these are frequencies. In Wi-Fi, there's about 100 frequencies. So we're going to call this frequency 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And then there's also time slots. These are all synchronized so that they send data at the same identical time. So let's say that your Wi-Fi transmits on this frequency in in that first time slot. So actually, to back up, when your computer connects to the Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi will send a sequence package to your computer. It says, okay, we're going to transmit on channels 3, 28, 45, 102 in this order. So your computer knows the sequence that it's going to transmit on. But nobody else knows, no other device knows what the sequence is, only the Wi-Fi and your computer. So then it sends one packet of data, and then it switches to that channel there. Then your computer then sends that data back to the Wi-Fi to verify that it's correct. And if it's correct, then it goes to that frequency. And the Wi-Fi sends the second packet of data to your computer. Then it goes to that frequency, and your computer sends it back to the Wi-Fi to be verified. So it's constantly changing, and it changes at the rate of about 100 times a second. So each 1 second, it transmits on 100 different frequencies. So it's very, very secure. It's virtually impossible for anyone to be able to break into it to listen to it, because It's basically random. There's no pattern to it at all. Um, it's frequency hopping, and you can't track it. You can't copy it. You can't listen to it. It's just virtually impossible. So it's constantly hopping back and forth, sending data back and forth. And if you can send 1.5 kilobytes of data 100 times a second, that's a pretty decent amount of data that's being transmitted. So as your Wi-Fi is sending information, it sends it here and it receives it here, it sends it there and receives there and so forth. But let's say it sends it right here and another device happens to land on that same frequency at the same time. Well, we refer to that as either a crash or a collision where two devices happen to hit the same frequency at the same time. So the data is not going to get through. So when it goes up to here, the data that came back to the Wi-Fi is not correct. So the Wi-Fi says, okay, we need to send it again. So it sends it again and it comes back for verification. These collisions do happen sometimes, especially if you have more devices. The more devices you have on your Wi-Fi, the more chances there are that there's going to be collisions. So each time a collision occurs, it has to resend the data, which causes your data rate to slow down. And if you get a lot of collisions, it can slow down quite a bit. And that's what really slows your Wi-Fi down. That's what slows your internet connection down is because of the Wi-Fi traffic. And if you have a computer and a cell phone and um, an alarm system, security cameras, anything that's connected to Wi-Fi, it's all sending data on these same frequencies all at the same time. And the more stuff you've got on the Wi-Fi, the more it's going to slow it down because you're going to get more collisions and it has to repeat and repeat and repeat. So that's what slows down your transmission rate. It's not the system, it's not the internet company, it's not anything else. It's the Wi-Fi. It's how much stuff you have. And Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and wireless internet, they all use the same technology. It's the exact same thing. So these are very, very secure. Nobody can listen to it. There's just no possible way because nobody knows what the sequence is. Only the Wi-Fi and your computer knows what that is. I hear people are concerned, like if you're in an airport or a public place and you're using a public Wi-Fi, well, you have to be careful because people can listen. Well, no, they can't. They cannot listen to your transmissions. It's not possible. But what they can do is if it's a public Wi-Fi that has free access, they can actually log into the Wi-Fi and they can find your computer. And if they're skilled enough, they can hack into your computer through the Wi-Fi. So that's the part you have to be careful of. But as far as somebody being able to listen to it over the air, it can't happen. There's just no way. So that's how Wi-Fi works and Bluetooth and all the other devices. So if your internet is running really slow, check and see how many people are on the internet and see how many devices are running. That's the reason my computer at my house, I've got it hardwired in. I don't use the Wi-Fi for that reason. Because there's too many other things going on. And also, if your neighbors have a Wi-Fi, it's all in the same frequency band. So you may not have a lot of things in your house going on, but your neighbor might. If your neighbor's got a computer and a phone and a bunch of other stuff running, it's going to compete with this frequency hopping. So it's going to slow your data down. So anyway, that's how Wi-Fi works. Now, what I'd like to do is I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour, kind of show you some actual repeater systems. These are ham radio repeaters in our area. If you're in the Kootenai County area, you might be familiar with them. This particular site, this is Canfield Mountain, which is just right on the eastern side of Coeur d'Alene. And we have a repeater there. And if you can look right at the very top, this antenna right here, that's the antenna for ham radio that's on Canfield Mountain. We're in a really, really nice spot on the tower. The antennas that are farther down, they're blocked by the tower, they're shaded, but ours is right at the top, it's right in the open. So we've got a really prime spot for it. Okay, inside the building, this is what you would see inside a typical repeater site. Remember I was telling you earlier about the Kootenai County, they have this huge, huge trunking system. Well, that's what this equipment is right here. I don't know how many channels are in there, but this is all 700 megahertz trunking. And they have, I think there's 8 or 9 towers, and each tower has a whole bunch of these. So it's a very, very sophisticated system, and it works really good. Like I say, it's very expensive, way beyond our budget. And over here, they've got a couple of older conventional repeaters that they've kept in service just for backups. So here's a closer up view. It's kind of hard to see because you're actually looking through the rack and you're seeing the equipment in the next rack over. This particular site, it actually runs on a 48-volt battery system. It's a huge battery. It's about 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and about 3 feet tall. Probably weighs several tons. But they have the whole building runs on this 48-volt battery system. So for our system, ours is just a 12-volt system. So I can get my pointer to work. Here we go. Okay, right here at the top, this is a 48-volt to 12-volt converter because we need the 12 volts, we're not the 48. So that's what that's for. This is just a fuse panel here. This is the controller for the repeater. This is what makes it because the repeater itself is just a transmitter and a receiver, and this is what makes it do what it does. It has the timeout timers, it has the voice ID. If you've ever listened to it, the K7 ID repeater voice that comes out of this box. And then right here, you see it's actually a mobile radio. This is the link that goes to the Mica Peak repeater. Because we have 3 repeaters that are linked together. And this is the link that goes over to the Mica repeater. And this right here, this is the actual repeater itself. This has a transmitter and a receiver in it. And both the transmitter and receiver, they're full duplex. So they can transmit and receive at the same time, which is all controlled by this box up here. And this, you can't see it, but on the back side, there's actually an isolator. An isolator is what prevents interference to other repeaters in the area. It kind of cleans up the transmitter so it doesn't cause any interference. And this right here, and again, you can't see because all the equipment's on the back side. This is called a duplexer. And a duplexer makes it so you can transmit and receive on the same antenna at the same time. It's just a big set of filters is what it is. And they work very well. They've been around for a long, long time. So that's basically those other components I was telling you about in the video that in order to make a repeater system work. This is the repeater on Mica Peak. This one is a VHF system. And this one's a little different. There's no battery system up here. So this is just a power distribution. And it also has surge protection and so forth in it. And then this is the fuse panel, the same there. And this is the radio right here that links over to the Canfield repeater. So this radio talks to the radio in Canfield so that the 2 repeaters are linked. And this is the controller. This is the same unit that was on Canfield. And this is the repeater. It's the same repeater except this is VHF and not UHF. And this is that isolator again, which is makes it so it doesn't cause interference to other repeaters. And this is the duplexer. Notice how much bigger this duplexer is. It's about 5 times bigger than the UHF one was because it has to do with that wavelength thing. Remember how we talked about as frequencies get higher, the wavelength gets shorter. So at the higher frequencies, the UHF frequencies, the wavelength is very short, so the cans are very small. But at VHF, the cans are much larger because it's a longer wavelength. But this is a set of filters so that you can transmit and receive on the same antenna at the same time. And then down at the bottom, that's a power supply that runs the whole thing. So that's the actual repeater systems that we use. Oh, here's a newer picture. This one actually has 2 link radios. There's one here and one here. This one links to Canfield Mountain, and this one links to Little Blacktail Mountain. So all 3 repeaters are linked together, so if you talk into one, it will broadcast out all 3 repeaters at the same time. So you can be on one repeater and somebody else can be on the other repeater, and you can talk back and forth. It's a pretty neat system. It works really well. This is the outside view, and this is the antenna for the repeater. And you see there's just a single antenna because it's transmitting and receiving at the same time on the same antenna. And antennas can do that. They work just fine. This is, if you remember earlier, we talked about a Yagi antenna. So this is a little Yagi antenna with 3 radials on it. Okay, that's the link radio to Canfield Mountain. It's pointed over towards Canfield. And if you can see that right there, this is another Yagi antenna. And this one's pointed to Little Blacktail. So that's how we link them together. So that's an actual working repeater system. That's what we use here in the county. Okay, I'm trying not to run out of time tonight. There's a term called crossband repeater or vehicular repeater, and those are available in ham radio. There are some ham radios that'll do that. And let me show you how that works. You can have a mobile radio in a vehicle or in your house or whatever, and you have a portable radio. And the mobile radio now this only works in crossband mode. So if you're going from UHF to VHF, so if you get a VHF frequency, a 2-meter frequency will come into the base station and it will retransmit on a UHF frequency so that you can listen to it on a portable radio outside your vehicle, or you can go down the hill or outside the house or something. And then when you talk back, the portable talks back into the base station, and then it retransmits on the VHF frequency. So it's kind of a way of extending communications, but there are radios that do it. It's referred to as the UV mode. It means it's UHF and VHF. So if you have a radio that has a UV mode button on it, that means that it's capable of becoming a repeater. So they're actually quite popular. A lot of people like them. Okay, satellites. There are ham radio satellites up in space. They're built just for ham radio operation. This one is referred to as the PRISM satellite, and it's for digital only. So you can have a computer tied to a radio over here, and it can send digital data up to the satellite, and the satellite will just hold it in its memory. It doesn't rebroadcast unless it's told to. So you can send a signal up to here, record your information or whatever, and then somebody clear on the other side of the world can then log into the satellite and retrieve that information. Tell the repeater, okay, I want you to send me your data, and it sends it down to here. So whatever you typed in here is stored and then forwarded to your computer over here. So those are available if you feel inclined that you'd like to tinker with satellite. There are satellites up there, and there are people that use them. So that's one method of communications. It's I won't say it's real popular, but there are some people that do it. Okay, I wanted to show you what the IRLP is. This is something, there's a lot of them around. It's called the Internet Radio Linking Project. And this is a really cool thing. A lot of people use it. Let me show you how it works. You set up a base station somewhere. It can be at your house or somebody's house or building or something. And that radio is connected to a computer. And the computer is then connected to the internet. And then someplace far away, it can be anywhere in the world actually, is another computer which is connected to the internet. and it's connected to a base station radio or some type of radio in that faraway place. So when you have a portable radio, you transmit into this base station and it connects through the internet, goes all the way over to a radio someplace far away, and somebody with a radio over there can hear it. And then you can talk back and forth. You can connect to China, Japan, Africa, Australia. I mean, they have these all over the world. And so it's kind of a neat way of being able to communicate. If you don't have an HF radio or if you don't have HF capability, this is a way to get long range communications without having all that equipment, all those antennas. These actually work quite well. Each of these, this is called a node. A node is just that IRLP link, and at the other end there's a node. Each node has a number assigned to it. It's a 5 or 6 digit number. So when you check in, you have to enter the number of the node that you want to connect to, and then it will connect through the internet to that particular node. And then you can talk to somebody in some faraway place. It's pretty cool. Okay, there's another system called Echolink, which is almost identical with a slight variation. And in Echolink, you have a base station. Oh, got somebody logging in late. Okay, start with the base station, and it's connected to a computer, which is then connected to the internet. So this part's all the same. And then someplace far away, you have another computer that's connected to the internet. But in this case, there's no base station radio. We just put a microphone and plug it into the computer. So you can now talk directly into the computer and talk to a radio that's someplace over here. Sometimes people like that. If you're like on vacation or something and you're in a motel and you want to talk on the radio, set up your laptop, plug in a microphone, and you can log into the internet, to the Echolink, and talk to somebody back home or somebody someplace else. But this case, you don't have to have a radio. You can just do it directly with the computer. Okay, got a little video here. I think this is an actual demonstration of how to use an IRLP. Let's see, I'm gonna have to go pull up the video.
IRLP is Internet Radio Linking Project.
Yes, that's what it stands for. Okay, now. Okay, go.
Hey guys, and welcome to this instruction.
Oops. Okay, let's wait till we get it connected here. Let's see, we have to make it full screen. There we go. Okay, I think we got it set up here. Okay, this he's going to demonstrate how to actually use an IRLP, how to connect to it.
Hey guys, and welcome to this instructional video on how to use IRLP. If you don't know it already, IRLP stands for Internet Radio Linking Project, and IRLP can be used to go from your local repeater to any other IRLP node or repeater in the world. So basically, just to give you an example, I could key up a repeater here locally in town, and I could connect to another repeater worldwide if I wanted to. Pretty simple stuff. So it's pretty simple to use, but I never see any how-to videos on YouTube on exactly how to use this. Keep in mind, this is kind of the default tones that are used for IRLP over most repeaters, but some clubs that run repeaters and whatnot, they require that you give a donation before they give you all the access tones to use their IRLP and whatnot. But luckily, we have some local guys here that let us use their IRLP without charge. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pull out your radio and go ahead and turn it on. Hopefully you have it programmed with a local repeater that has IRLP enabled on it. As you can see, I don't have my antenna hooked up on here. I'm actually hooked up outside to my J-pole. I think I paid about $35-40 for it. It's made by a gentleman named Michael Martins out of, I believe he's in Wisconsin if I remember correctly, and his call sign is KB9VBR, and his website is jpole-antenna.com. Very simple way to get yourself a nice antenna for the house without breaking the bank. And then also you should be able to hit repeaters about 30 miles to 40 miles away, like I am. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you got to kind of know where you want to go. You may have a buddy already that has an IRLP in his area, and he can give you the node number, or you may have to look it up online to kind of see where you want to go. So I've already used this app right here called IRLP Finder, and there's a gentleman, his call sign is VK3CRG, and he made a cool video about his IRLP node and whatnot. So and it's done very well, and I've used it before to talk on, and it was pretty damn clear. His node number is 6789, and he's over there in Lara, Australia. So it should be about daytime over there right now, if I'm thinking correctly. It should probably maybe even be early morning over there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to contact that node, and that's 6789. So just go ahead and write down whatever node you want to go to. Just make sure it's IRLP enabled. So now that I've got that information, I'm going to go ahead and pick up my radio here. And this is just a Kenwood TH D72A. A lot of handhelds work the same way. You need to know how to enter DTMF tones on your handheld. Usually you just push the push to talk button and you type in the tones. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a call out and let everybody know that we want to use the repeater. Just listen for a minute, make sure nobody's using the traffic there. So I'm going to go ahead and call out and make sure nobody's on the channel. KF7ZKF wanting to use the IRLP. So I'll just wait and see if I get a call back. And I've already been listening to the channel for another minute or so, so I know nobody's on it. So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold the push to talk button, and I'm going to push 7 and 3, and I'm going to release. And what that'll do is that'll release the IRLP node if it's hooked up to a reflector, or if it's hooked up to another IRLP node right now still and somebody forgot to turn it off, whatever the case may be. So now that I press the 73 in the DTMF and nothing came back, that tells me that there's no other reflectors or no other nodes currently hooked up. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and type in the node number of where we want to go. So I'm just going to re-verify that, and that was 6789. So I'm going to go ahead and hold my push to talk, and I'm going to type in 6789.
Welcome to the Township of Lara, Victoria, Australia, IRLP node 6789, operated by VK3CRG. Link on.
So that's all it takes. Just enter the 4-digit code, and you should get a message that says, you know, link connected or welcome to the node, depending on how they set up. But you'll get some kind of notification letting you know that the link is now connected. So once that's connected, you can then go forth and call CQ. After listening for a minute, make sure you're not going to interrupt anybody's conversation. So when you're done using the IRLP, you don't want to just turn off your radio and just be done with it. You want to make sure to disconnect the link so it's not sitting there using up the internet bandwidth and whatnot, and it's not leaving the link connected. You want to be courteous about it, and you want to disconnect the link. So usually you'll call out with your call sign and let everybody know that you're disconnecting the link. KF7ZKF, CQ. So we'll go ahead and try to make a contact out there in Australia real quick. So I'm not hearing nothing back. Typically, that's the way it'll be. Is you won't hear anything back from anybody out in that area unless they're tuned into that repeater. I don't have a time zone clock on me right now, so I can't be sure about the time zone, but I have been successful in making contacts out there in Australia, Canada. I've made a few, Hawaii, and I'm pretty fairly new to this stuff as well. So when you're done using the link, you're just going to go ahead and make your call out and let them know you're closing the link. KF7ZKF, closing the IRLP link. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hold the push to talk one more time. And you're going to enter 73.
Thanks for visiting the Township of Lara, Victoria, Australia. IRLP node 6789. Operated by VK3CRG. Link clear.
At that point in time, the link is clear, and you can move on to another node if you wish. Just make sure to call out with your call sign and let everybody know that you're going to be using tones. This could work the same way with a mobile radio as well, where you just push the talk and you press the tones. I believe on the ICOM radios, they make you press the DTMF button before you use it. It just depends on the radio that you're using at the time. And then keep in mind there is like speed dial memories for these as well. But that's a basic tutorial on how to use IRLP. And once again, remember that not all repeaters that have IRLP in your area may be available for you to use if they require certain other access tones to use. But keep in mind 73 is the disconnect tone, and then you put your 4-digit code in after making that transmission to go where you want to go, and then 73 once again to disconnect. And it's as simple as that. Any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think we're getting just about done. So that's how to use an IRLP, and Echolink works almost identically the same way. But they're kind of fun things. So if you don't have HF capability, and if you don't have long range antennas, this is a way to literally talk around the world. It can be a lot of fun. Okay, one last thing I'm just gonna mention briefly. There's a thing called D-Star. This is a digital format. It's digital modulation that we talked about earlier. It is available. It's not really widespread because it's still pretty new technology, at least in the ham radio world. But D-Star has some really cool features. You can talk all over the world. You can send pictures. You can send text messages. You can do all kinds of stuff. Basically, it's like a cell phone. It works pretty much the same way a cell phone does. So it's something that's available. You can connect onto the internet. You can connect through repeaters. You can connect through satellite, and do all kinds of stuff. We don't really have time to get into all the particulars about it, but that's something that's available. It's still kind of spendy. Digital radios are a little expensive, but if that's something you'd like to get into, it's available, and some really cool stuff out there. Okay, well, that's all we have for tonight. Let's see, our homework assignment. I'd like for you to continue taking the practice tests. The more you take them, the better you'll get at it. So the reading assignment for this week is going to be Chapter 3, Electrical Components and Circuits. This is what we went through about the second, or I think it was about the second class. We went through those earlier. And if you need a refresher, I will send out the links to all of the classes that we've had so far, and also the link for tonight's class as well. So you're welcome to go back and look at previous ones if you need a little extra help on it. So electrical components and circuits is what we're going to go over this week. Okay, any questions? Any thoughts? think we're about done for tonight. Didn't go too far over time. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.
Hey Dale, when you're trying to